a connection with people all around our continent, at least, and beyond, by the sounds of it, just around, this common thing that we're all tackling right now. It's probably the first time in our lives where we've all had this common thing to rally around, right? So in terms of how I fit in with Alana, she and I got to know each other recently. She was a guest on the podcast that I host called People at Work. And in fact, Shelley is with us today as well, and she's also an alumni of the podcast. So great to have you here, Shelley. So my interest is predominantly around how we create experiences for people at work that are enriching and engaging and help people feel fulfilled in the workplace. And so that relates to a number of different topic areas, and things like, how do you show up as a leader, how do you create psychological safety in the workplace, how do you help people continue on in their growth path with you, whether you're a small business or a large business. At the center of businesses are people, right? So, and now more than ever, we need to be sure that we're taking care of our people. And so I've been thinking a lot over the last few weeks just about what's changed for people in the workplace, but really what hasn't changed for them, right? There are some basic needs for people in the workplace that are still there, whether we have a pandemic or not. And so I think it's a very fascinating time for us to be living. I know that it's a very trying time, but I also feel like it's a hopeful time. And I hope that we can learn from this and look forward and not back at what we've left behind us. Because I personally don't think that we should go back to how we used to run businesses and run parts of society. I think this is an opportunity for us to actually take a bit of a breath and reset things. And I know that this is in the framework of a lot of grief and sorrow and hardship for many people. I totally understand that. But I think those of us who are in the fortunate position where we can be thinking about what this means in terms of a positive impact as we move forward, I think we should be taking that time. I think we owe it to our businesses, our people, and to society to reflect on this and make some positive decisions to move forward. So that's why conversations like this are amazing, because we can be thinking about this and talking about this together, and it's only through collective action that we actually see change come to bear. So that's why I'm here.
I love it, and I'm so happy that you're here. If you've been impacted in your work by this, and you're still, maybe you're not an entrepreneur, but you're at work, many of you are transitioning, so feel free to put in the chat box what is overwhelming for you. Bev, one thing that I found to be interesting was I was looking at a conversation that someone was having, and I think it was one of the members of the Shark Tank, and he was saying, how do we think COVID has impacted us just in our normal day work, especially if we're working from home? So I replied to him, well, I think that it really hasn't impacted me in terms of the way I work, but there was never this big umbrella, like there are people in hospitals right now, sick or not making it or whatever, and here I am working, right? So it's like that dichotomy of knowing that there's other thing is out there and then still trying to focus and then looking at the news and seeing those things. And so a lot of it's been, I think it can still be, even if you're very positive, for the very positive person, I think it can still be a challenge to kind of just stay level-headed, because you need to know what's going on. Of course, you need to stay tuned, but at the same time, you also have to be productive, and work is still happening. So people are still, whether they're at home or whether they're at work or whether they're raising their kids, things are still in motion. So I love that point of you saying we have to find a way to try to basically stay in motion. And so I also want to bring, hey, Mark, how are you? Mark, do you want to jump in here?
Good. I'm good. Hey, Dr. D.
Hey, good to see you. So Mark, why don't you introduce yourself and just in your own words, like, tell me, what do you think the climate is like for people just kind of out there, just overall?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, Dr. D. So I've been working with entrepreneurs and first-time entrepreneurs starting businesses. So they're seeing a lot of their finances, coming up short and not being able to make ends meet, for their customers and their clients. And so I loved what Bev was saying, this piece about grief. I mean, I've been thinking about this part a lot where I feel like the climate out there, we've moved too fast. Like this has come on so quickly that we haven't given ourselves enough space to actually sit with the grief of loss of normalcy. Yes, loss of family, loss of actual lives, but the loss of just normalcy. Going to a coffee shop or seeing my mom, you know, like I'm talking on the phone with her, trying to get help her as a 70-year-old, you know, get familiar with Zoom so we can have one-on-one conversations. So there's a lot going out, and I feel myself inundated in just constantly, you know, this anxiety. And say, I feel like I'm upbeat. I feel good. I try to bring that to, you know, my family and friends and community, but I think that I still like feel like, you know, I turn my head and it's another news story and everything is about it. So I've been trying the last week or two to kind of sit in that space of just grief and not trying to rush past. You know, I think we have unfortunately, a lot of time still ahead of us to go through this. And I think that, you know, giving ourselves that time would be beneficial to us.
I really appreciate what you just said. It's so true, kind of like looking at how this has impacted family members, looking at how we can be. I know for me, I was pretty positive, and then there was this one day where I was supposed to speak and do a workshop, and I almost was like, you know what? I don't feel like doing it. Not that I didn't want to do it, but it was just kind of like the weight of what's happening. I think that was like, wow, what is this actually going to mean? And for me, it also was making me think about the resilience of people, the hope in people, like what was this going to do? So, and as you mentioned, just kind of checking in on family members, sending texts, if I can, like doing a quick video call or just, are you okay? And that kind of thing. So I appreciate that, Mark. I appreciate you sharing that. Soon to be Dr. Naima, I see you doing a lot of nutrition videos. So why don't you talk to us about what you've been trying to do? I know you're in BCM, and you're also, tell everyone a little bit about your background and what you're trying to do with regards to nutrition.
Well, I'm Naima Jackson, but I go by Naima the Nutritionista for business purposes. And I am a mom, I'm a registered nurse, I'm a nursing professor, I'm a PhD student. So I understand what, you know, we're going through right now, right? I'm a nurse, so I understand the pandemic side. I'm a mom, I understand being stuck in a house with my kids, right? But I also understand the importance of nutrition and helping us through some of the things that we're going through. First of all, nutrition can help boost our immunity, right? So I think we all want to have a great immune system to fight off a pandemic, to prevent it from even coming near us. That's number one.
I do.
Right? I mean, I hope, right? And number two, when you think about isolation, it has an ill effect on mental health, right? So if you are somebody who already deals with anxiety, depression, bipolar, or any other mental health issue, it can be worsened by this. And if you're someone who's never had a mental health concern, guess what? You're still at risk. So using nutrition, balanced nutrition, whole foods can actually help with that. So I've been doing a lot of live videos, giving recipes and just smoothie recipes and things like that to help boost that.
Thank you, Naima. That's awesome. And every time like today, I thought of you because I had a salad. I also had a piece of chocolate cake, but the salad, I thought of you. And so that's awesome. So the other piece is it is important. I've been thinking a lot about, even if it's an entrepreneur or an individual, I've been thinking about people that are living at home alone and don't necessarily, because some people have families, but then there are people who are single and they might just be home, but still that isolation and that need to connect is still very much true. So I had a fun question to ask us, because I was thinking a lot of people are glued to the TV, but I wanted to ask you to think of what are some really creative, unique things that people can do without looking at TV? And put that in the chat box. What are some things that we can do that has nothing to do with watching TV? Let's assume we've caught up the updates on what's going on and we really need to give ourselves a mental break. What are some things that we can do that don't entail watching television? Bev, you want to try to give some ideas while people put things in the chat box?
Sure. Yeah, I've had to be quite creative over the last little while. So I'm a runner. So I've been a little bit challenged over the last few weeks because I've wanted to go running, but not sure if I should go running because I don't want to be out there when we're supposed to be inside. So I've been getting pretty good at practicing my physical distancing while running. So that's been great. But just also, I agree. I think having some downtime away from the TV and particularly the news, and you can get the news from your phone and your laptop as well. So it's not just the TV, right? So I've really loved having some virtual happy hours with friends, virtual dinners, and this evening I'm actually playing some online board games with some friends of mine who live in San Diego. So that's some of the things I've been up to.
That's awesome. I actually attended it. It was interesting. It was a pajama party networking party with a bartista who was showing how to make this drink. It started off well, and then it didn't. You know, I was like, it could have gone well, but then it just was a lot of ambiguity. But I love the idea of bringing people together around something fun, and why not food or having, you know, whatever it is, having a trivia game or doing something really unique. Let's see what some of the suggestions are. Pam says, oh, hey, Pam, all the way in Atlanta. Good to see you. She is a WBC member. Journal, read, and cook. I love that. A girl's night out via Zoom. Okay, I'm just getting some awesome ideas. I started listening to audiobooks via my library's free application. That's awesome, Shelly. Yeah, audiobooks are awesome. Nikisha says meditation techniques, play board games with your children, dancing from YouTube, and exercises. Hang out. Well, we need to hang out with you, Nikisha, because you just have like a roll of ideas. I love it. Reading, journaling, writing, reading, board games, webinars, phone conferences with people. Now, here's something I think is awesome. Now, I'm a journaler. So one of the things I just have had, as you guys know, I love writing. So I had this bag of some journals I had when I was in college. And I said to myself, I need to look at what was I thinking all the way when I was like 19 years old. And it's so funny. I started reading it and looking at what I was thinking, that what I thought was important back then. It's just amazing. Like some of the things I thought was important when I was 19 to now is just funny to me now. But when I thought about that this weekend, I actually started looking at what I was reading, these journal entries about what was happening during the Black Plague and how they were actually living. And so this morning, I had the awesome opportunity of reading this story about how, you know, how they took their time to do everything. And there was this discussion around how when the pandemic was ending, people really made calculated decisions, like when they needed to go out, and hence somehow there were a lot more healthier people. I thought that was interesting. I was like, that's interesting. And then I also had fun, of course, reading about how Shakespeare and Sir Isaac Newton, how they, even in that time period, they were very creative. I mean, the theory of gravity, right, came out of that time. This idea of color and what he thought about it. And so a lot of people who were insular people, they found ways to use this time. I call it incubation. They found ways to use this time to be very inventive. And I think it's also a useful time for us to kind of find ways to be really reflective on the things that we say we really want to do. Because I know a lot of times when we're busy at work, when we're doing what we say we are supposed to be doing, we often have other things that we've hidden in our basement or somewhere in our journal that we want to do. And we keep saying, we'll get to it one day. And that usually is like 4 years from the time we thought about it. How many of you are still with me? Yes. So sometimes, so for me, I've been saying, you know what, I have no excuse as to why I'm not able now to do some of the things I said I didn't have time to do, whether that's like looking over notes and things, because we go to webinars and seminars and all these things. This is a great opportunity to look at your internal library and see what are you doing with all that valuable information. And then the other piece too is knowing that you can really feel, I want to ask you guys this, you can look at the news so long and feel so helpless, feel like there's nothing you can really do because you feel like, well, I'm not in the hospital, so how can I help? I want to ask this question, how can we really help? We're, of course, social distancing, giving that assumption, but have you felt like I felt like, where you felt like is there anything I can really do? Or do you feel like now is the time for us to use whatever our giftings are, specialties, what we're doing in the workplace, to really kind of project and show positivity? I just want to hear from anyone. So feel free to either raise your hand and then unmute yourself. So I would love to hear you. All right, Naima.
So as I previously said, I'm a registered nurse, but I'm not on the front line. I'm a nursing professor now. So what I chose to do with my group, Women's Health with Naima, the nutritionista, is to offer lunch to a nurse once a week for the next 4 weeks, just to say thank you. Because it is so difficult. I know what it's like to be a nurse and to be on the floor. I was on the floor when Ebola was here and everybody else was running home, right? And we were running to the hospital. So I understand the mental anguish of not just of being there yourself, but of potentially carrying it home to your families. So if I can do something as simple as lunch, just to say thank you, it really does go a long way.
All right, I love it. Bev, what about you? And then Trelane, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so I live in a part of Vancouver that has quite a mix of cultures and lots of small businesses and like coffee shops, breweries, grocery stores, restaurants that are small family businesses. And those people are really hurting right now because in Vancouver, our city and our province actually shut down all restaurants and bars a number of weeks ago already. So with the only option of doing delivery or takeout, that's the only way those businesses can continue to operate. So what I've been doing is wherever possible, I'm supporting a small business. So instead of cooking, 7 days a week, I'm doing 2 of the meals through takeout through the small businesses, and wherever possible, I'm buying things like bread or a pie or just whatever I can do to funnel my dollars towards small businesses to help in whatever way I can. And that seems to be the most impactful way that I can meaningfully help. I'm not a healthcare professional. I don't have any access to help other than making a donation or perhaps volunteering in some way to make masks, but I don't have a sewing machine. So I think it's generally what I'm seeing in our community here is that people are just trying to help in whatever way they can to help businesses at this time, because they're also suffering, and the fallout of this is widespread, right? So
I love it.
So that's what I would encourage others to do. If you can support your neighbor or support a business in your area, do so.
Yeah, and we will be putting together a list of places where if you felt like you wanted to donate or you wanted to do something, because I do think there's something beautiful if you're able to serve in any capacity. Maybe it's something as simple as, singing happy birthday on Zoom to someone that might live in another state, but they don't have to feel, like they're completely by themselves. So that's something to think about. Anybody else? Let's see, I think I saw a comment here. So Shelley says, a listening ear helps those who are hurting and struggling, showing empathy by feeling with them and letting them talk about what they are feeling. Absolutely true. There are some individuals that I've been talking to that just really feel alone and isolated. So just an email, you never know how an email might really just encourage someone. And these are people that you know. Mark says, use your own gifts. Mark, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. So initially I felt like I wanted to jump in and do something that would help with the actual problem. There was nothing that I could really, I'm not a doctor, I didn't feel like I could give in this way. And then I started realizing I should use my own gifts that I like. And that for me is coaching. So I work with entrepreneurs, I help coach entrepreneurs, and there's a few businesses that I had been working with. They lost, they've had to shut down. I mean, they lost, they're not an essential business. So I'm in Boston, they're not an essential business in Boston. They can't, work right now, and they've had to kind of shut their doors. So just coaching them through some of the challenges that they're going with. And this was one of them. But then I actually went through and thought, who are the people in my life that I haven't talked with in a while? So I did this very simple exercise. I just went to my text messages and I went to like my oldest text. I just scrolled to the bottom of them. I looked like who it was and I just sent them a text and I just said, how's it going? We haven't checked in a while. And I thought that was a, a nice way just to send support. So I've been going through people I haven't reached out to for a while. And, just these are the things that I think we can all be part of and have a community and tribe together.
I love it. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. And it's funny how sometimes we think we have to go so far out, but really it's like, just open your phone. It's like, oh, here's 5 people I can help literally by just sending a message, or just, if I'm just going to mute whoever has themselves. Okay. Yeah. Just, sending a message of encouragement or just checking in. I think that's awesome. Hey, Juanita, how are you? Feel free to comment if you would like. It's good to see you. So this idea that we feel like we're not able to contribute, we can kind of demystify it. We can remove that and just say, you know what, let me just start with what I know to do or what I might be feeling to do. And that's a great place to be. And if you are working with small businesses, I mean, the number one thing that you can do is just even check in on them. Or like, I love Bev's idea about if she can support there's a couple of restaurants we wanted to support, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they didn't, so they're not doing the delivery, and so we're like, oh, we wish you were, because I wanted to go. I love that place. So yeah, supporting. One thing I've been doing is definitely offering as much as I can, to the extent that I can, offering and comforting a lot of small businesses with learning how to use virtual means to keep their constituents engaged, whether they're a traditional business or they're a digital business. Because the worst thing we can do is just completely shut down and we're like, hey, we're all watching the news, but we're like, so I always say the number one thing we can do is just virtually engage. And how do you do that? Well, I have to be honest, if you are a new business owner, video has the highest consumption right now. So if you don't mind doing a video, it's very useful. Or if you don't mind using graphics to do a video, something to keep your constituents engaged is very much needed. Let me tell you why. So literally millions of people are at home. There are about 300 million people on WhatsApp. There are billions of people on Instagram and Facebook. And guess what we're doing when we wake up in the morning? If we're not looking at the news, we're scrolling through our feeds. So that's also another place where you can put a lovely quote or a beautiful picture. One of the things I said to myself I wanted to do, and maybe it's encouraging, is because we can't get outside, is to look at all those vacations I took and start really highlighting these beautiful places, because the travel industry is heavily impacted, but it doesn't mean that we won't ever travel again. It's kind of like reminding people through images and visions and words and quotes that, what, we will get to the other side. As light as that sounds, that's something that's very imaginative. And it makes me think of the story about how the Monopoly board was created. See, a lot of people don't know the Monopoly story, but basically the inventors of the Monopoly story, they were really living in extreme times, and they were in poverty, and they were just thinking about what they would do if they had all of this money. And so that's how the Monopoly game actually was created, because this couple sat down and started envisioning, what would I do if I had these means? And so in the same way, I do think the big elephant in the room with all of this is the word fear. Right? Because none of us, and I hope none of us, are impacted by this. But the other piece of that is the impending fear. And there was a woman who, one of my colleagues, who did research around what happens when people lose their jobs, and like what happens with their mentality and their motivation, et cetera. And she found that not only was job loss a contributor to depression, but so was the impact of those that didn't lose their jobs, which was interesting. So you had people that lost employment and they were feeling, pretty down and out about things. But then the people that were still working, they also had this impending fear of like, oh, I don't want it to be me. And it kind of creates a really strange work environment. Bev, does this resonate at all? Anything I'm sharing right now? Feel free to comment.
Yeah, I think it's just it's an extension of what I was saying earlier when we did the intro around the need for people to be connected hasn't gone away. And in fact, it's probably increased, and our need to be imaginative and creative with the way that we keep engaging people has skyrocketed. And I think to another point that you made earlier around, many of us have transitioned into a remote working environment suddenly over the last few weeks, but we're actually not working from home. We are actually living through a pandemic, right? So it's different. It's different from those dispersed companies who, as an order of business, are always having to engage their employees because they are a remote working company. Like, we are working remote, but we're doing it against a set of conditions that is incredibly taxing on our mental wellness, our physical wellness, to the points that Naima and Mark made as well. There are facets to us that we have to take care of through this time. And we, as employers and people who are responsible for people, I don't know how many folks on the call are within organizations or independent in terms of having their own businesses or consulting practices, but I work for a company that's a tech company here in BC, and we've got about 75 people, and it's really been quite different. We've had to really think about, well, how are we actually getting in front of people individually, and the way that people are responding to this is very different. There's so many different variables that can impact how well you're going to be when we come out the end of this. So it's not just about, you have to create conditions for people to be able to do their work. You have to create the conditions for people to be healthy mentally through this. And that adds this layer of complexity that we've never had to deal with before. And, I think you, as an employer and as a leader and as someone responsible for people in your organization, regardless of how many people you have, you do have a responsibility to create that psychological safety in the workplace for your people. But I think with this set of conditions, even the most experienced and the most gifted leader is going to be struggling, right? Because we've never had to deal with anything like this before. So, I take strength in that, because I think that together we're stronger. But I also think it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time for people to be focused and productive. And I think we're probably all feeling that individually. I know I am. I've had ups and downs this past few weeks where it's been incredibly difficult to focus on work. And, I think, understandably so. I think you'd have to be a robot to say that you haven't been affected by the world in the last few weeks, right? So, but I think getting back to what you were asking earlier about what we can do about this, I think first and foremost, just staying home is the best thing you can do to help everyone right now.
We're all
stay home if you can.
Yeah.
If you can stay home, you should stay home. That's whether or not your government has mandated that kind of behavior. That is definitely one way we can stop this from spreading and stop the potential impact that it's going to have on each of us in our communities. So, I'm very grateful that I work for a company that took swift action, and we immediately started working from home when we were aware of the curve was starting to ramp up in our part of the world. But I know that there are a lot of people who don't have that luxury either, right? Like frontline workers, essential services workers. So there's a lot of people out there who still have to go to work and whose companies aren't set up to help them stay away from danger the way that I'm fortunate enough to be able to do. So I think just thinking about connection is a very important part of how we're going to come through this. And this conversation is one of those things. But I think just also not making assumptions about how other people are feeling about it is also a really important thing to do right now, because everyone is going to respond to this in such a different way and maybe has different skills and abilities to deal with it. And different circumstances. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Trelane, you've had your hand up for a while, so now's your time, and I'll come back to Bev's comment. Yeah.
Hi, I had it up for a little while, but it was where you were asking about different things that we were trying to do to to help somebody in this. So my daughter's teacher sent out a week worth of little assignments they could do. She's in kindergarten too, and for every different subject area. But she just sent the schedule. So what I did was I took the little assignments that she gave, and I created worksheets with them. And then I sent them to the rest of the families in the class.
Oh, good.
And, you know, it was a small thing, but it was one thing, like one less thing that I wanted her to have to think about. And so today she had emailed and I reminded her, I was like, if you get it to me, you know, in the next 2 days, I can, you know, make the sheets for you or whatever. And she was like, oh, I'll try. Thank you so much. It was super helpful. And some of the parents had emailed saying that it was helpful. So, you know, it might not be, you know, a major thing to some people, but to people who are struggling or just like, this is too overwhelming, I'm just not even going to do it, or I can't even figure out how to parse this thing out. You know, it's like, okay, if you have a printer, print the thing out, give it to the kid, keep it moving, you know. That's what I'm doing, and that's what's helping me. The other thing I even also with her school, her
Do you want to tell people what it is that you do for work?
I'm an assistant principal.
Mm-hmm.
So the principals at my daughter's school send out a weekly newsletter. And what's been really great is that they've continued to send it every week. And so that's been helpful just to know like where they are, what their thoughts are. And this week it was really, really good. They had topics from all the different grade levels. They had kids and teachers who had contributed to the newsletter. And it was so special. Kids were talking about how they were doing, how they were feeling about what's happening, missing school, etc. So I just emailed them back and I was like, this is really, really great. I applaud you for doing this and collecting all of this. And during this time, you guys are really working hard, and thank you. And let me know if you need anything. And they both emailed back already like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. You know, so it's those like little tiny things that we think of, but they're so meaningful to other people, just for somebody to say, you know, to know that they notice them, that they recognize them and the sacrifices that they're making. I know for a fact that it goes a long way. I don't get it a lot from where I work, unfortunately, but I do try to give it when I see it.
I think that's beautiful. And I have to say that, you know, you mentioned like, oh, because the things that we do naturally well, we're like, oh, it's just a little, you know, we're like, oh, it's just this little thing I did, but really it's like major for someone else. You know, it's like, you know, I could not even imagine Trelane one day in your shoes. Like, I don't even try to envision it. I'm just like, that's what Trelane does and she does it well. So I do have to reiterate that sometimes it's the smaller things that just count. And, you know, and so, you know, when we're thinking about all the different ways to have these, what I like to call these touch points, you know, so, okay, we can't be physically in a space with someone. That doesn't mean that we don't have the rest of our sensory mechanisms. That doesn't mean that we can't hear or we can't laugh or we can't, you know, stomp around and jam to our favorite song or listen to a book as Shelley said earlier, or make a smoothie like Naima has been showing her tribe to do. So there are so many things that we can do now to maintain our resilience. But one of the things I think about, so my research is in persistence, what causes people to stay upbeat towards reaching a new goal and what causes them to fall off. And one of the things I thought was interesting that I kind of want to highlight is there is intrinsic motivation. So this is the kind of motivation that is fueled by the person's beliefs, values, and systems of thought from within. And then there's external motivation that comes from the validation, affirmation in different work settings or in maybe a club or something like that. And the research really shows that the more that an individual is able to pull from that intrinsic place, the stronger they are able to commit towards reaching whatever their goals might be. So this is really important because sometimes people are much more externally driven, and then you have people that are more internally driven. And we're going to have to find, I think, some kind of resolve to find that inner resilience. We're going to have to tap into, okay, what's important for me? You know, what's my rhythm? What are the things that get me going? Because I think we all have a muse, or we all have that place. So some people find that through meditation. Other people find it through journaling. Other people find it through looking at an awesome visual painting. Some people have spatial awareness. There's so many different, think of Howard Gardner and the multiple intelligences. There's so many different facets as to how we can look at this time and how we can fuel our intrinsic motivation. And so I want to ask you guys as we wrap up, because we've got about 20 more minutes left. About 20 more minutes what left. Are some of the, I'm going to, here, there we go. If you want to say anything, just raise your hand so I don't miss you. And Jennifer, it's good to see you. I see that you're here. And so what are some of the things that, and we've kind of said this a lot, but what are some of the things that you're doing to keep your inner resilience? So what's your routine? So I'll share with you a little bit of mine. One of the things I do, it's going to sound awkward, but first I wake up and I'm like, I woke up. Okay, I'm here. I'm like, I'm here. All right. I look in the mirror to make sure that's true. And then after that, I'm like, okay, I do go to the news to see what the latest is. I feel empathy. I feel all of that. I take a moment, but I do allow myself to feel those feelings of sadness. I mean, you don't want to, but I just allow myself to feel it. And then after that, I'm like, all right, I need to dance. So I might either put on my favorite songs, or I might go into my office and just listen to some jazz. And then I might journal about whatever my goals might be for that week or whatever. And just being in that space is really great. That's why for a few seconds, I'm going to ask all of us to, whether you look to your table or you close your eyes or whatever, I'm just going to ask us to think for one moment about who we are in terms of how we do the things that we do, right? So some people, like I said, do all those other things. I just want you to look down and just take a moment and ask yourself, what are some of the things you're going to need to do to maintain resilience, positivity, excitement? Like some of you know, oh, I need to run, or some of you know, I need to journal more, or some of you know, I need to talk to my coach, or whatever it might be. I'm just going to give us 1 minute of non-interrupted silence for us to get clear around what we are going to have to do to maintain our resilience and our momentum. And after that minute is over, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, just to share one thought that might come to mind. All right, you guys with me? How many of you with me? Put those hands up. Yes, you guys are with me. All right, and let's begin. I'm going to look down. Okay. That felt like the longest minute for some reason. But how many of you felt for a second when you did that you kind of was able to kind of take away the noise? Anybody? Yes. I definitely was able to just say, okay, what do I need to do? So as we did that, anybody have any things that came to mind, like what you feel like you're going to need to do to stay centered and focused and positive? Shelley, yes.
Hey there.
Hi.
Thanks. This has been a really great discussion. Thanks, Bev, for inviting me and inviting all of your LinkedIn connections. This is cool. One of the things I was going to say is that for me, I find a mantra is really helpful. So I went through a very traumatic time years ago, and it was a very scary time in my life. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I had to develop a career for myself, and had no source of income at all, and had 5 children. I had been homeschooling. So I developed a mantra that was, I'm not going to allow fear to dictate my destiny. And every time I would begin to feel fearful about the tasks that were before me and what I needed to do, I would just tap into that mantra. I'm not going to allow fear to dictate my destiny. And recently, with what we're going through now, because I feel like it compounds all the other small things in life, right? So we all have our stuff we're dealing with, family pressures, work pressures, whatever personal is going on. And the pandemic just this compounds that our emotions are very heightened. So when I've been meditating and doing my yoga in the morning, my focus and my mantra has been about peace and calm. And every time I begin to feel out of control or isolated or, you know, concerned because life is not going normal, I go back to that mantra and I remind myself peace and calm, Shelley. So that's very helpful for me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, first of all, Shelley, for your first time ever tuning into this, thank you so much for your transparency. That I appreciate you. And I have to say that, yes, mantras, affirmations, positive statements are always beneficial, just like you. And I loved how you also shared, you know, we all, I would say Jim Rohn says it rains on us all. It's so true. And we all have different seasons of life. And so when we're going through our winter season, you know, that's like when we need to like, oh my gosh, this is tough. This is not going to just be an easy ride. And it's I do have that idea that, yeah, this is going to be tough and we're going to have to link arms and we're going to have to do a lot more than we would normally do, just to get ourselves in that momentum. And one of the affirmations I used to say to myself is, I am delivered from scattered thinking. My yes is yes and my no is no, and I will not be cowardly unsettled. I mean, that was for me, not for you guys, but I will not be cowardly unsettled by situations. And I will love my hair, my skin, my feet to dance, my cheeks of splendor. I mean, now I'm saying it with a lot of confidence, but when I started to say it, it felt so corny because, you know, I was like, these affirmation things, does this even work? And I remember I wrote those words, but I didn't really believe those words. And then when I started saying it, and I wrote my first affirmation when I was about 20 years old or 22, but I remember when I was 24 and I kept saying this and I memorized it and it really became something for me. That's when it really manifested into, no, actually I can be a confident person. And one of the things I can share is that it can be very comforting to tell yourself, you know what? It's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And one of the things I want to challenge us to do, and this is why we formed, if you're not part of the hashtag IWBCC community, Shelley, I would love to have you there. But one of the things that's beautiful is I've seen some rich relationships develop just because we had this tribe and just because it's not just about helping you get goals, it's also about forming a community. And I think the beauty of hardship is that it forces us to kind of come together in ways that we probably wouldn't be forced to if we didn't have to. Does that make sense? It's like when I moved to Portugal, for example, and Portuguese wasn't my first language, I had to learn how to be interdependent in ways that I didn't necessarily feel comfortable doing. And I think that one of the things that this can allow us to do is to grow. We can use this uncomfortable situation to allow us to grow and to allow us to learn about others and to share and have compassion and listen a little longer. Like these things, you know, if I say, well, how are you doing? Not, how are you doing? Oh, you're doing great. I'm doing great too. No, actually, how are you doing? And then waiting that extra 5 minutes. So these are just some of the things that I think we can do. I just don't want to skip over Nikisha's comment. I'm shifting my job as an educator online on a visual platform. I'll be doing meditation techniques, movement breaks, and fun brain activities. Since the students and I would be confined to a chair in front of our computers, I will make sure that my diet is still healthy, and continue to take multivitamins. I love it. And Naima is clapping her hands. I love that. Jennifer, did you want to say, should I be saying Dr. Jen? Do you want to say anything?
Hi.
Hey.
So I was on the computer, but we are having major internet bandwidth issues in my entire condo, so I'm now on the phone.
Okay, that's fine. I love your background, by the way.
Looks better than my kitchen.
I love it.
Where I was today, so that's part of keeping sane, is I've been going, trying to go hiking once a week with my son.
That's awesome. Wow.
So.
And Jennifer is in my dance class that I've been teaching. So I know you guys don't even know. They're like, wait a minute, what? So Jennifer is actually she comes in my Zoom room in a dance class that I've been teaching. It was kind of like, was I going to do that? And it's been fun. Jen, have you enjoyed yourself?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I think dancing and trying to connect and just make sure there's physical movement. That's probably my son you hear yelling in the background. So I'm going to mute again.
Okay, thank you so much. And Pam, we haven't heard from you. If you want to say anything, we have about 6 more minutes. Juanita says, I love the exercise and I know I'll need to use social media more. Continue communication with the family, encouraging our unity, finish reading Think and Grow Rich, and completing my book. Yes, I love that. So Juanita is also an entrepreneur, and make sure I didn't miss anything. Awesome. So I feel like today was so rich with full of ideas and insights as to how we can spend our time, how we can do the small things to help others. I do also want you to know, if you haven't gotten your International Women Build Confidence Conference tickets, they're absolutely free for the for the month of May. So make sure you go to the website and click on IWBCC to grab your virtual ticket. That's happening in May. And also we'll be having continual Elevate discussions. And so we will be interviewing Bev this Friday. And so make sure to tune in and look out for the timing for that. And just continue to take all of these lovely suggestions. We will definitely place this entire video, what we've just done today, in IWBCC and across other platforms so that other people can get some of this awesome information. And I just want to say that you may not think that you've done anything because you showed up here, but I can tell you for sure, just because of the work I do, I always get emails from people and they'll say the most interesting things. Oh, I was feeling so down today, and then I heard this person on your stream talk, and that really encouraged me. Or I almost had a cookie, but I heard Naima talk about how I should have a smoothie, and so that encouraged me. And just seeing us show up is going to be like help other people say, oh my gosh, they're smiling, maybe I can smile. So I know it seems really minute, but I believe that this conversation was really, really awesome and enriching. I hope you feel the same way. And we won't meet this coming Sunday, Easter Sunday, but we will meet again at the same time, different password. So just make sure you check for the password. And our last meeting will be the end of April 26th. So just check the email calendar for the exact dates for the Zoom room. But this has been awesome. And then lastly, I want to let you know, for those of you who are looking to learn how to take your information and turn it into a digital course, we're having what I'm calling an Edupreneur meeting. And so again, if you're interested in that, just make sure you check our event schedule on my website. So as we're closing the last 5 minutes, I want to open this up and just see if any of you have any final thoughts. How was this meeting and conversation for you? I know I've gotten so many emails that I believe that we need to continue having these conversations because so many people need them. And so I want to encourage you, if you feel like these meetings need to continue, I would love to hear your feedback. You can also just email me, for those of you who have my email. You can also comment here, but this has been valuable. Any last thoughts anyone wants to share about today? Thank you so much for coming out. Juanita says, very encouraging. It was great, much needed. Thank you, gotta run. Thanks everyone for your participation and thoughts. All right, awesome. Raisa says, great, very insightful. And I felt unified, wonderful. I wanna thank all of our guests today. I wanna thank you, Bev, for just giving your insight and discussion. I wanna thank you, Mark, for giving your insight and discussion. I wanna thank you, Shelly, for tuning in for the very first time, for Naima giving your tips, for Jen coming for the whole weekend. I feel like I've been seeing you. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a wonderful night. That's it for us. Check the restreams. I appreciate you all. Remember, we are stronger together. Let's continue on this journey. Bye-bye, guys.